David, hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I do feel like you guys had better intros cuts than I did.
I know. We needed to make one for David, like the really cool Jackie one. But yeah,
More
it's
feedback
Yeah,
for
I mean,
next episodes.
I feel like I have not yet attained the level necessary to have the cool intro. So
give it time, give it time. Cool intros come with age. So I mean Twitch age. So David, thank you so much for being part of this. First of all, David, before we kick it off, who are you and what do you do?
so I think of myself as a recovering sysadmin. Somebody let me out of the server room or the colo, and I somehow snuck away, and I ended up working in other areas in tech. Um, but for the past 15 or so years, I've been involved in various aspects of open source, and I work on open source strategy and marketing at AWS now. I've been involved in a few open source projects like the Fedora project, which is a Linux distribution.
Okay.
A bunch of projects at the Apache Software Foundation, where I'm now the president. I spend a little bit of time with folks at the Internet Security Research Group, where I serve on their board of directors, and they do cool things like Let's Encrypt, and they're doing a bunch of memory safety work with a project called Prosimo, where they're trying to rewrite critical pieces of open source infrastructure in memory safe languages. And so, yeah, there's still some colo that hasn't realized that I've gone missing, 10 or 15 years ago. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Thank you, David. Now, let me start off with a banger. What's your favorite open source tool? Ooh.
So,
or a project.
So
I know you're
Vim.
Hey! Okay.
I mean that's the one that I use every single day, right? And I mean there are lots of flashier and more interesting ones, but learning how to bend Vim to my will was a huge change in my productivity overall as a sysadmin, and I'm still using it today, even though people don't let me do real work.
I love that. So, and by the way, I'm a huge fan and user of Vim. So with Vim, the beard comes, it grows. That's you can see the examples here. And also for
Wait,
the
where's
ladies
my
out
beard?
there, it's the beard on the inside that counts, right? So it's fine. But yeah, Vim is just wonderful. And also chat, what is your favorite open source tool? What is the open source tool of choice that makes your life, your day so much better? So David, I'll kick it off with something that, again, as a sysadmin myself, I grew up in environments where we considered open source to be like, oh no, that's just some young kids building things. It's not enterprise ready. We should not use it. It's too expensive to maintain. It's free, but it will break any moment now. Things have changed massively since way back when, where I worked at least. So how do you see the perception and the progress and the movement of open source software in both small and large companies?
So I think as a development methodology, that open source has really become the default that most people are adopting, especially when they're doing things that are applicable to a wide group of folks, right?
Yeah.
And some of this is because there's just not a ton of value in keeping some of these technologies locked away, right? Nobody's going out and building proprietary web servers or application servers, right? That ship has sailed. I think there's also this big shift in just expertise. It is so easy for a community to come together and share expertise around tools. That if you are looking to build user expertise and you're looking to build adoption, open source is a really easy way to make that really easily accessible. And so a lot of folks have adopted the open source methodology because it gives them those kinds of benefits. I do also think that there has been a sea change in how we perceive open source as an industry, right? So, in the old days, you had folks like Linus saying, I started this operating system, I'm building a kernel, and it's not going to be anything professional. And now the entire world runs on Linux, right?
That's insane.
And so we used to think, yes, it's not good, it's not enterprise quality, but I think, and this is particularly true, I think that cloud native aspects of building infrastructure have influenced this. It was good enough to accomplish the job, right? Yeah. It may not have had 100% of the polish, certainly at the time, but I think it accomplished the purpose, and I think that drove a ton of adoption as well.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I found is that, in the old days it was one developer, a couple of contributors doing something open source, but now you have this army of people contributing to open source software, and this is where we say, like, quality is important, but quantity has a quality of its own. We have so much developers, so much people building and contributing to these open source tools. It's just wonderful. And me as a tinkerer, that's amazing because I can change things, I can modify things, I can bend it to my will. But for enterprises, that doesn't really matter too much, I guess. They mostly care about it being good and being secure. And what is more secure than having a look direct into open source where everybody's scrutinizing the code you've written? So
I know that you, as a sysadmin, you never did anything subversive.
No.
But I also think that that open source removed a lot of the friction in adopting new technology, right? You no longer had to go to legal and procurement and get someone in finance to approve a budget to go acquire a piece of software. You could, oh wow, there's Samba. Yeah. Oh, there's Tomcat. Let me go deploy this, and then suddenly the company that you're working for has adopted it. It's become a critical part of the infrastructure, and maybe nobody had any idea that that's the case.
Yeah, and it's this wonderful circle because you, as a company, you start using it, you start benefiting from an open source tool, then you start investing your brain power, your engineering skills into putting back stuff into that open source tool most of the time, I guess, or sometimes. But it helps create this circle of innovation, of adding things, of new contributors. That's just wonderful, right?
Yeah, even the faster feedback cycle, right? I'm sorry, Jackie, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries. I was just going to say, I think too, as we're talking about how it's getting bigger and enterprises getting more involved, we're also opening the circle of trust to other people too. So the bigger it gets, the more guidelines we have about how people can get started, and you don't just have to either know the person directly or have done something similar. It's more friendly to other people to join in, and I think that's something that's been really great to see over the last, 10 years-ish that I've been looking at tech now. So yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
I think you're right. I think as we welcome more people, we get more feedback. And for open source projects, getting the diverse set of perspectives and, hey, I'm doing this weird thing that you never intended this piece of software to do. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Well, let's go add that as explicit functionality. And we end up in a much better space because the people actually using it are either easily connected to the people building, or they become the people who are building.
It's wonderful. I remember a long time ago, I saw a bug in Runit, the init system for Ubuntu, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to go around it. I went to Back then it was, I think, free chat. I went to Freenode. I went to IRC and asked the developers of it, like, can you help me with this? And they were able to help me. It's insane. I think that's wonderful. Speaking of contributions, can you talk to us about how AWS is doing stuff with open source? What is our contribution thing? How do we do stuff? How do we encourage it, or whatever we do?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that AWS is a huge place. And so the strategy varies from team to team, right? But at its core, our first principle there is that we care about what our customers care about, and in a lot of cases, our customers care deeply about open source, and that means that we care deeply about open source. And so you see places like the Rust project, where we're investing a lot of folks into improving the language, improving the compiler, working on making sure that Rust is more easily accessible to developers, because Rust may not be the easiest language in the world to learn. And we're seeing tremendous performance gains, which we think is valuable for everyone, right? Less resources needed to run services. And so we're excited about Rust, and we're investing in Rust, and hopefully making that easier for our customers and the rest of the world to adopt. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Finish your thought.
Yeah, so other places that you see where we are, where we're moving really aggressively, if you look in some of the machine learning spaces, where we've got folks who are improving the state of how we run machine learning in the cloud, using a number of the common machine learning frameworks, and making that easier and more approachable for folks. We've got a lot of folks working on that, and those are all cool cutting edge things. But then I look at folks in Corretto, and Corretto is AWS's Java or JDK distribution. And the folks in Corretto are, you would think that Java is a settled technology, and there's not a ton of innovation there. And I know as a person who was once confused as a Java developer, that Java's been around for a really long time, and it's considered one of those crufty old languages. But then I look at some of the garbage collection work that the Corretto team has done with Red Hat, and the Shenandoah garbage collection work is absolutely transformative in terms of improving performance at scale. And so, again, we're focused primarily on areas that our customers care about, and hoping to improve things not just for AWS, but also for our customers who are using a lot of those technologies.
Fully agreed. And that's one of the things, like, people think because something is an old language, it is what it is, but things get improved, such things as with Corretto and all that stuff. So I have a question for you about Rust in a second, but to the audience, hello everybody, and we just noticed that we got a bunch of more people watching us. Welcome to Build On Live Weekly. This is a weekly live show, episode 1, where we talk about technology, the cloud, the community, and everything in between. My name is Darko, that is Jackie, and right now we're talking to David, the president of the Apache Software Foundation, about all things open source. So put your comments in the chat. Let us know, are you contributing to an open source project, and which one?
And of course, if you have questions for David, please throw them in chat. We're keeping an eye on it, and we're going to ask them for you.
We see your question, Molly. We're going to come back to that later in a second. Here's a great comment by Ricardo. Ricardo is one of our colleagues. I think another value from open source is that democratization of the knowledge. It's amazing how projects like Hadoop and HDFS influenced many of the distributed systems here today. Absolutely, right? It just brings knowledge to a lot more people. Again, as a non-developer, I can look at a code repository and figure out how things work so I can implement it in the things I do. So it helps me build knowledge and also build systems like other systems. So, cycle of improvement, as they say.
Yeah, I do think that's that it's stunning how open source frames our understanding of technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about distributed systems, and Hadoop and HDFS is a great example. That largely came out of the academic papers around MapReduce.
Yeah.
And things like MapReduce, that was some dark enigma that you could not grasp the concepts of. And now we think, oh, that's MapReduce. That's a simple thing now. But having to conceptualize things like MapReduce 20 years ago, I mean, that was very elusive, and you had to be working at incredible elite places to even have a need for it. And now it's oh yeah, that's MapReduce. We understand how that works. And we are literally standing on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely. With each day, even more. It's fascinating how these things go forward. A couple of questions for you, David, before we let you go. Number one, AWS contributes to projects, but how can people contribute to AWS open source projects? What is the best way to do those things? Do we accept pull requests and contributions for non-Amazonians and the like?
So the answer is it depends, right? And open source is really an overloaded term, right? So we've got open source as software that has a license recognized by OSI as open source, and that makes distribution and consumption easy. We have, and I think it's the open infrastructure group that calls these the 4 different types of open, right? We've got open design, open governance, and of course open source. And so some of the projects are machine generated, and there's not really an opportunity to get involved, just to be perfectly honest, right? We've got some tools like Smitty that will programmatically generate a set of language bindings. And if you want to contribute, it's not going to really be to those language bindings. It's going to be to Smitty itself to improve that.
Yeah.
You can obviously report bugs and get involved there. We've got another class of projects where we actively want users to get involved. And those are things like Bottle Rocket, which is a really slimmed down container operating system with a heavy focus on security. And they're using Rust to build in memory safety as part of that security strategy. And yes, they would welcome you to get involved in the development of Bottle Rocket. And you can open up pull requests, you can engage in design conversations. All of that's happening on GitHub.
Yeah.
We've got others that are even another tier advanced, like OpenSearch, right? And OpenSearch just released version 2.1 last week, literally a week ago. And they're doing some really fascinating things. That is technically an AWS owned project.
Yeah.
But it's got outside maintainers. All of the design decisions are happening in public. So if you want to know what's coming up, those decisions are happening in GitHub and on their forums, and you can see the future of what's coming. And they've got some really compelling new features that they're actively working on that I think are probably going to hit in version 3.0 in 2023. So you can go get involved there today. Again, as with all open source projects,
it depends.
It does depend, but it's going to be go get involved where the community communicates, and that's going to be forums or mailing lists or GitHub, and jump in. You do not need an engraved invitation for those projects.
I love that. Jump in. Thank you, David.
So I just had a question for you. I think we've talked a little bit about what your favorite open source tool was, and we've talked a little bit about AWS ones as well, and adjacent to us. But Is there any upcoming projects or tools that you've seen that you're really excited for or keeping an eye out on?
So ironically, Microsoft just released an SBOM generation tool. And I saw the announcement yesterday. I think it's got some interesting bits that are that I haven't seen in some of the other SBOM generation tools, and it appears to be language agnostic. I'm actually booking time next week to spend playing with that. That one definitely has my attention right now, and I'm excited to see that they open source that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
That's cool. Yeah.
David, thank you very much. Finally, a last question. AWS wish list. If you can push a button to change something or change the way we do or change an open source product we own, something that you can change in the open source sphere, what would it be?
Well, there's so many things that are coming that I know are happening that aren't yet public, so
Okay.
I can't say any of those. I think speeding along version 3.0 of OpenSearch would probably be at the top right now because there's a lot of activity there. But I'm also I wish we were doing a better job of telling about Bottle Rocket, honestly, because Bottle Rocket is for if you're in the container space. Bottle Rocket is one of the more compelling container operating systems out there, and their focus on using Tough for updates and using Rust as their using Rust for so much of the control plane to eliminate an entire class of security vulnerabilities is incredibly exciting. And I think it's usable far beyond AWS. So if you're running containers on-prem or if you're in another cloud, I think Bottle Rocket's still really compelling.
Yeah, beautiful. So I guess we should talk more about Bottle Rocket, and we can do that in one of the future episodes. So we definitely will have a look at that. David, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you here. Hopefully we have you in the future when we talk about a bit more about some open source things. We're going to continue now with something else. So we're going to be continuing next to where Jackie and I actually talk about some open source tools. But before we do that, fancy transition time. Thank you, David, once again.
Hey there! Thanks for checking out this video. Remember to give it a like and share with your community. Then hit subscribe and the bell for all the latest content that will help you build on AWS.